Long ago, in the heart of the Western lands, there was a kingdom named Ethran Vale. Ethran Vale was no ordinary realm. It was a kingdom forged in magic, nestled between the towering Garron Mountains and the shimmering Miren Sea. Its people were as skilled in sorcery as they were in craftsmanship, and they thrived under the rule of their benevolent king, Arlen Kael, who was both a warrior and a sorcerer of unmatched prowess. Under his reign, Ethran Vale was a beacon of peace, its cities gleaming white under the sun, with bridges made of silver and streets that sang with enchantment. But peace never lasts forever, and in the shadows of Ethran Vale's greatness, a forgotten force was awakening. Lyra, a young woman with no noble blood but a spirit of fire, lived in a small village on the outskirts of Ethran Vale. She was a dreamer, with her heart set on the stars and her feet always moving toward adventure. Her village, Tharald, was modest, with thatched roofs and cobblestone streets. But Lyra had never been content with the quiet life of a farmer's daughter. She had always felt a call to something more, something greater than her small world of wheat fields and daily routines. It was during the annual Festival of Suns, a celebration of Ethran Vale's founding, that Lyra's destiny began to unfold. Every year, the kingdom would gather in the capital, Caelarith, to honor the spirits of the land with songs, dances, and offerings to the ancient gods. This year, for the first time, Lyra convinced her father, Marik, to let her attend. The capital city was a marvel, unlike anything she had ever seen. Towers of white stone rose to the heavens, their tops adorned with silver flags that fluttered in the wind. The streets were bustling with merchants, performers, and citizens dressed in their finest garments. The air was filled with the scent of exotic spices and the sounds of music and laughter. But as Lyra wandered through the vibrant city, her eyes drawn to every new sight, she could not shake a strange feeling in her chest, a pull, like a thread being tugged at the core of her being. As night fell and the grand fireworks began to light the sky, Lyra found herself walking away from the festival, drawn by that invisible pull toward the edges of the city. She soon reached the old part of Caelarith, where ancient ruins of a time long past lay forgotten. The cobblestone streets gave way to cracked stone paths, and the laughter of the festival seemed far away. In the center of this forgotten district stood an ancient temple, its stone walls covered in vines and weathered by time. The temple was dedicated to Lorien, the goddess of balance, worshipped in the days when Ethran Vale was first founded. But now it was little more than a relic, visited only by scholars and the occasional curious soul. As Lyra stepped into the temple's shadow, she felt the pull intensify. Her breath caught in her throat as she walked through the archway into the temple's inner sanctum. At its center stood a pedestal, and upon it a single artifact, a sword, its blade made of crystal, glowing faintly in the moonlight that filtered through the cracked ceiling. The sword called to her. It whispered her name. Before she knew what she was doing, Lyra reached out and grasped the hilt. The moment her fingers closed around it, the world seemed to shift. The air crackled with energy, and a voice, soft yet powerful, echoed in her mind. "You are the one. The Guardian returns." Lyra stumbled back, her heart racing, the sword still clutched tightly in her hand. The voice continued, weaving through her thoughts like a melody. Ethran Vale is in peril. A darkness, long forgotten, stirs beneath the land. only the Guardian can restore the balance and protect the realm, the sword pulsed in her hand, and with it came a flood of visions. Visions of a time long before her own. She saw Ethran Vale as it once was, during an age of war and chaos. She saw the rise of the Council of Three, ancient sorcerers who had once ruled the kingdom with iron fists, their power fueled by dark magic. It was only through the efforts of the first Guardian, a warrior of light and fire, that the council was overthrown, and Ethran Vale was restored to peace. But the council had not been destroyed. Their power had been sealed away beneath the earth, their spirits bound by ancient magic, waiting for the day when they could rise again. And now that day had come. Lyra was still reeling from the visions when the temple doors swung open behind her. A figure stepped through, cloaked in black, their face hidden by a hood. The figure moved with unnatural grace, their footsteps silent on the stone floor. "You have the sword," the figure said, their voice low and cold. "Then it is true. The Guardian has returned." Lyra backed away, the sword glowing brighter in her hand. "Who are you?" she demanded. The figure lowered their hood, revealing a man with pale skin and eyes as dark as the void. "I am Vorak, servant of the council. I have come to claim what is rightfully theirs." Before Lyra could react, Vorak raised his hand, and a bolt of dark energy shot toward her. Instinctively, she raised the sword, and a shield of light erupted around her, deflecting the attack. Vorak's eyes narrowed, and he stepped forward, his hands crackling with dark magic. "You cannot stop what is coming, Guardian," he hissed. "The council will rise again, and Ethran Vale will fall." Lyra's grip tightened on the sword, her fear giving way to determination. She didn't understand the full extent of what was happening, but she knew one thing. She couldn't let this man, or the darkness he served, destroy her home. With a cry, she charged at Vorak, the sword blazing with light. He met her attack with a snarl, their powers clashing in a burst of energy that shook the temple to its foundations. For a moment, it seemed as though Vorak would overpower her, his dark magic pressing against the shield of light. But then, something within Lyra shifted. The sword pulsed again, and she felt a surge of power unlike anything she had ever known. With a single swift strike, she cut through Vorak's defenses, the blade of light slicing through his form. Vorak let out a scream of rage and pain as his body dissolved into shadow, leaving only a faint echo of his voice behind. "You cannot stop the inevitable." Breathing heavily, Lyra lowered the sword, her heart pounding in her chest. She had won, but she knew this was only the beginning. The visions had shown her what was coming. A darkness that had been sealed away for centuries, now threatening to engulf Ethran Vale once more. She had to warn the king. She had to find out what it meant to be the Guardian. The next morning, Lyra stood before the gates of Castle Kael, the heart of Ethran Vale's power. The guards at the entrance eyed her warily, their hands resting on the hilts of their swords as she approached. The crystal blade slung across her back. "I need to speak with the king," she said, her voice steady despite the weight of what she was about to say. "It's a matter of life and death." The guards exchanged glances, clearly unsure of how to respond. But before they could speak, a new voice rang out from behind them. "Let her through." Lyra turned to see a tall man with broad shoulders and a stern expression approaching. He wore the robes of a high-ranking official, and his eyes were sharp with intelligence. "I am Joran, captain of the king's guard," the man said as he approached. "You carry the sword of the Guardian. That is reason enough to let you pass." Lyra followed Joran into the castle, her mind racing. The halls were grand, lined with tapestries depicting the history of Ethran Vale, the battles, the triumphs, the founding of the kingdom. But now, those triumphs felt like distant memories, overshadowed by the threat of what was to come. They reached the throne room, where King Arlen Kael sat upon his throne. He was an imposing figure, with silver hair and a presence that radiated strength. His eyes, however, were kind as he looked upon Lyra. "You carry the Guardian's blade," he said, his voice deep and commanding. "What brings you to my court, young one?" Lyra took a deep breath and stepped forward. "My lord, the darkness is rising, the Council of Three, they're coming back, and I've been chosen to stop them." The king listened in silence as Lyra recounted her story, the visions, the battle with Vorak, and the prophecy of the Guardian. When she finished, the room was deathly quiet, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Arlen Kael stood, his expression grave. The Council of Three were the greatest threat this kingdom has ever faced. Their power nearly destroyed us once, and now they seek to finish what they began. He turned to Joran, his eyes hard. "We must prepare the kingdom for war." Joran nodded, already moving to relay the orders. The king looked back at Lyra, his gaze filled with both determination and sorrow. "You are the Guardian,"